Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trevor Surge, and I'll be moderating the session today. We are going to be taking part in this week on Water for Development session. Today, Thursday's theme is Washing Away the Pandemic with Joint Hands, and today we'll be launching the Towards Inclusive Green City Sanitation in Lusaka publication. Next slide, please, Finn. Just to do a little bit of housekeeping, the session is being recorded. So for any participants who don't want to be recorded, you need to leave the session. Alternatively, by staying on with us and listening to this very interesting session, you give consent to the recording. The recordings will be made available after the session. Please, we do ask for everyone to turn off your camera, as we want to focus on the recording on just having the cameras on of the folks that are presenting or are taking part in the panel discussion. Also, we do, for sound quality reasons, ask you please to mute all your microphones, as just for folks speaking and presenting to have their microphones on. In addition, we encourage everyone to use the chat function to not only introduce yourself now so we know who all is with us, but also to post questions, comments and thoughts throughout the duration of the session today, so we can capture those and either use them, answer them as we go through the session. All presenters and organizers will also be answering as many questions as they can in the chat function. So without further ado, just to give you a quick overview of the agenda. We'll have some opening remarks followed by the presentation on the publication. Thereafter, an introduction on the Reform the Water Sector Program Phase 2, followed by a very interesting panel discussion, which we're all looking forward to. And then we'll end the session with some closing remarks. My job is not only to moderate, but is also to make sure we try and keep on time. So I'll be using a few tricks to do that. And if folks are talking a little bit longer than they ought to, there will be some music that comes over my speaker to let you know that you need to wrap up and finish. And I hope that works out nicely. Next slide, please. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mike Enskat, who's the group lead of the Infrastructure, Energy and Water and Mobility Group at GIZ within the large global section. And we welcome you, Mike. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to give us opening remarks. And I'd like to hand over to you now. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Trevor, for this kind introduction. And hello and a warm welcome to everyone. I'm speaking to you from GIZ headquarters in Germany today. A very warm welcome to all of you, and a special warm welcome goes to our key partners from Zambia, who have played a very important and integral role in the development of this publication, which we are launching today, and which is entitled Towards Inclusive Green City Sanitation in Lusaka, Achievements and the Way Forward. A warm welcome also from my side to the two GIZ programs. First, the reform of the Zambian Water Sector Program, and secondly, based here at headquarters, the Sector Program for Sustainable Sanitation. The collaboration and the co-creative efforts of these two programs have really contributed to the development of this publication and made it possible that we're together today to witness the launch. This collaboration has culminated in a product that provides us with important and astute recommendations for scaling up access to sanitation. So let me just highlight a few key takeaways that will be discussed during the course of the session. The publication informs us about one of the first climate-relevant regulations in sanitation and how to provide the complementary capacity for public and private service providers in the sector. The publication also highlights progress of the sanitation subsector in Zambia as one of the outstanding innovative examples on the African continent. In Zambia, the mandate of commercial utilities has now been changed to take up sanitation as well as sewerage. And the publication discusses what it means in terms of actions on the ground. Another key transition that is highlighted in the publication is the launch and finalization of the National Onsite Sanitation and Fecal Sludge Management Regulatory Framework, anchored at the national regulator. This further solidifies that Zambia is moving forward in providing access to improved safe sanitation services, reaching really the last mile. This publication is also very timely. To protect us from pandemics, we need functional systems and services along the whole sanitation chain. Publication helps us to get a broader understanding of how to make this happen. Only with a broad and integrated approach to sustainable sanitation and hygiene shall we be able to keep our economies going and, at the same time, protect infrastructure from climate change, which again protects the health of the underdeserved and marginalized population. But we also understand that there's still a long way to go, and the publication gives us an in-depth understanding of the challenges that still remain and the key lessons that we can learn and share in order to scale up inclusive green city sanitation. I would like to commend all those who have been part of the conceptualization and finalization of this important publication. Furthermore, I commend our key national partners who are the driving force and the change makers in achieving the national, regional, and international sanitation goals. So I wish all of us an informative and fruitful session that will inspire us to reflect on best practices and innovative solutions, and that can drive our sector forward. I'd like to thank you for your attention and wish you a good session.
Thank you so much, Mike, for those great opening remarks and for setting the scene, so to speak, for this session. We'd now like to move on to getting straight into it. So the meat of the session, which is the presentation on the publication. Next slide, please. And I'd like to hand over to the team who'll be presenting that, which is Doreen, Amanda, and Mincha. So over to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Trevor. Hello, everybody. I'm Amanda Malahan, and I'm an advisor with the Reform of the Water Sector Program, Phase 2. And I was previously with the Climate Friendly Sanitation Project. As Mike has highlighted, this publication is a story of great achievements that have been made in the sanitation subsector in Lusaka and in Zambia. And it also highlights the steps that have been taken, the lessons that have been learned, and also gives us good recommendations for the work that still needs to be done in order to achieve access for all Zambians. Next slide, please. This slide lists the people that were involved in writing the publication. And again, it was highlighted that this was a product of close collaboration between the two GIZ programs, Sustainable Sanitation Sector Program, and of course, CFS-Lusaka, but also, and most importantly, our key partners whose input and review of the publication was key. Before we proceed to get into the bulk of it all, I think it's good for us to set the scene in some way and give a short timeline of reform and sanitation in Zambia. Next slide, please. So GIZ has been present and supporting reform in Zambia for a number of years now, and the RWS program is now in its second phase. As you can see from this slide and the times listed on it, reform is not a fast process, and it's something that needs to go slow and steady. In Zambia, a major shift first occurred in the 1990s, so specifically in 1994, when the government published its first national water policy. And that was quickly followed by a sector strategy concerning the institutional and legal framework for water supply and sanitation services. The national regulator was formed in 2000, and this was a very important step for regulation in the country. And this was followed in 2011, a decade later, with the Lusaka Sanitation Master Plan and the first pit emptying pilots beginning in 2012. The Lusaka Sanitation Program, a multi-donor investment program, was started in 2015 and shortly followed by the CFS-Lusaka project that was complementary technical assistance to the LSP. I think at the end there, and very important for sector reform in Zambia, was that the CUs were officially named water supply and sanitation companies. I now hand over to Doreen.
Thank you very much, Amanda. My name is Doreen Barlow. I work as a policy advisor in the sector program Sustainable Sanitation in Germany. Now, the focal areas of the publication are areas that are pivotal for the development of our sector as a whole, and also for the enhancement and infrastructural development and service provision for the underserved and marginalized in Lusaka. Now, the first focal area, as you can see, looks at the enabling environment. So what strategies and policies that exist for decentralized solutions like on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. The second focal area dives into the efforts that have been made to scale up safely managed sanitation services, particularly in urban contexts. The third critical focal area analyzes the human resources gap that still exists within the sector. And we focus on how we can enhance workforce competencies and employability, particularly in the context of on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. Now, sustainable funding and financing mechanisms are definitely needed for us to achieve our goals in the sector. And the fourth focal area looks at funding and financing for OSS and FSM. Last but not least, we look at the interlinkages between sanitation and climate and the measures that have been put in place to increase resilience. And the content was developed in close collaboration with our key partners, the Ministry of Water Development, Sanitation and Environmental Protection, Lusaka Water Supply and Sanitation Company, Lusaka City Council, and the National Water Supply and Sanitation Council, NAWASCO. Next slide, please. I now hand over to Amanda to take us through the first focal area.
Thank you, Doreen. So as Doreen has mentioned, the first focus area of the publication is on OSS and FSM enabling framework. The main challenge highlighted in this focus area is that there was a strong focus on sewer connection. And this meant that there was very little standards for household toilets, and that OSS and FSM remained largely unregulated. There are a number of activities that have taken place in order to raise awareness and advocate for professionally managed sludge. The use of digital tools such as the shit flow diagram, as well as the piloting of the SaniPath tool in one peri-urban area of Lusaka, which was allowed the local authority to demonstrate the relationship between exposure to diarrheal disease risks arising from poor sanitation and their relative impact to general public health. The drafting of an OSS and FSM bylaw, which is still awaiting gazetting, as well as the other achievements in this area, highlight the steps that have been taken towards an enabling framework for OSS and FSM. These activities and achievements are noted, however, there are still some remaining challenges. In particular, communication and coordination between key organizations remains an area to be strengthened. Next slide, please. I hope everyone can see the next slide. It's stuck for me. Anyway, I'll continue. There we go. This leads me to some of the key recommendations and lessons learned from this focus area. Firstly, is stakeholder coordination and a cross-sectoral approach, which are both key. And the formation of the Lusaka District WASH Public Health Committee in 2017 was very important for addressing this. The committee remains an important part of communication and coordination in the sector amongst different organizations and also different departments. Another recommendation and lesson learned was that clear processes for OSS and FSM service chain, as well as clear roles and responsibilities with all key organizations, is key. And of course, enforcement continues to be important for safe, environmentally friendly FSM and OSS. I now hand over to Doreen. Next slide.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Now,
I beg your pardon, it's on me. Sorry. The second focus area is scaling up safely managed sanitation. Thanks, Doreen. One of the key challenges that was highlighted in this focus area was, of course, that there was a lack of data available to inform system design and solution service design. And this was coupled with a lack of good practices of scaling up. Detailed spatial mapping was undertaken for the 4 peri-urban areas that covered approximately 650,000 people, and shift flow diagrams were again important for this focus area. As 5 SFDs were produced, 1 citywide and 4 more localized SFDs. And these were important as they renewed focus and purpose to discussions amongst decision makers and advisors at all levels. Pit emptying technology testing allowed Lusaka Water to explore different approaches in operationalizing OSS while highlighting that solid waste management continues to be inseparable from FSM. Next slide, please. Some key lessons and recommendations from Focus Area 2 was that planning beyond the LSP remains to be an important part of ensuring that the work being done by Lusaka Water and LCC continues. Some future sustainable services are that there is a need for continued and further exploration of the emptying technologies and bankable business models. Capacity development across all departments of the utility is key for scaling up OSS and FSM, and the drive for standardized empty roll toilets should continue. I hand over to Doreen now.
Thank you. Focal Area 3 primarily focuses on workforce competencies and employability. And one of the key things that came out quite prominently is that recruiting qualified staff has long been a challenge for the Zambian sanitation sector. We see significant gaps in technical and management skills, but also at the same time on-the-job training for a wide range of professions that cut across the sanitation chain. Now, taking into consideration the enabling environment that has been created, there's definitely a need for us to focus more on ensuring that our frontline staff, particularly for OSS and FSM, receive the appropriate training that they need, because if they are safely managed services, then they're able to protect the population from diseases and contamination, something quite pivotal taking into consideration the cholera outbreaks over the past couple of years. Now, currently within the context of the reform of the water sector program, which phase 2, which builds on the experiences of the first phase and also the CFS-Lusaka project, there's a support towards the development of a government-led skills advisory group. And this group is basically to ensure overall guidance on matching the sector skills demands and also the sector skills supply. Next slide, please. Some of the key lessons derived from our respective partners and also outlined in the publication look into the need for these tailor-made trainings, particularly for OSS and FSM. We also outlined the importance of involving, obviously, a broad range of stakeholders to design the respective courses, but this is also taking into consideration the experiences of the key national partners that we have within the sector, and also the fact that the policy guidelines for vocational education and training lies under the docket of the Ministry of Higher Education and is implemented by the regulator TVETA. So there are quite a number of different stakeholders that have to be involved. We also look at the need, obviously, for anchoring these training institutions within the context of these national institutions. It means that the courses will be recognized countrywide, and this is added value for all parties involved. Next slide, please. The fourth focal area is looking at sustainable financing and funding. And the sector, as highlighted in quite a number of key policies and strategies, is that it has been historically funded in terms of capital investment, in terms of maintenance, and also operation expenditure. And even less funding has been directed to infrastructural development within our sector, in particular looking at OSS and FSM in underserved and marginalized areas. And some of these challenges that exist include the lack of sustainable business models and also the low demand for services within the jurisdictions of the commercial utility. So we need to assess the market potential for OSS and also assess the ability and willingness to pay so that we can be able to design business models that benefit the underserved. There's also a need for us to embrace different technologies that are adaptable and user-friendly, and of course that fit within the new regulatory framework and in accordance to the Zambian standards. Coordination of investments is pivotal in the Zambian sector, and there's a heavy presence of donors. So to ensure that basically we understand where the funding is flowing and all the different financing mechanisms that exist, it's important that we have some level of national coordination to ensure that we have an in-depth understanding of all the different interventions that exist within our sector. Next slide, please. Finn, next slide, please.
I already changed.
Brilliant. I can see it now. Thank you. We have further recommendations, obviously, within this focal area. Some of them is the need for Lusaka Water to introduce ring fencing of all sanitation revenue, and also to explore the self-financing potential, particularly looking at the tariff structure. And here, NAWASCO obviously plays a pivotal and leading role. Even as priorities are shifting, there's need for us to still put more efforts in expanding on beyond sewer connection in underserved and marginalized areas. And when it comes to financing mechanisms, what we learn from Lusaka Water, particularly under the Lusaka Sanitation Program, is that no size fits all. We have to take into consideration also the lessons that are being learned within Lusaka Water in implementing the subsidies approach and also scaling up household sanitation facilities within their jurisdiction. I hand over now to Mintia, and she will take us through the focal area, which is highlighting on interlinkages between sanitation and climate.
Okay, thank you, Doreen. Yes, I would like to highlight some of the main challenges that we identified in the sanitation sector in Lusaka linked to climate change. One challenge looking at climate mitigation is that it is estimated that the water and sanitation sector contributes up to 15% of local greenhouse gas emissions. In some cities, including Lusaka, it is highly likely that this number is even higher. And this is mainly due to the underestimated and often unknown emissions from on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management, which leads to the second challenge that there is limited data available, especially on on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. A challenge looking at climate adaptation is that extensive flooding has a great effect, especially on the population living in low-income areas. And on the other side, increased droughts have an effect on power supply, as Zambia is mainly relying on hydroelectric power, and thus water shortages are threatening ongoing operations, in particular of wastewater treatment plants. One activity I would like to highlight is that CFS-Lusaka, jointly with their partners, was supporting the capacity development of Lusaka Water Supply and Sanitation Company, NAWASCO and SEMA, the both regulators, to better monitor and report on greenhouse gas emissions and on energy efficiency using the ECAM tool, which stands for Energy Performance and Carbon Emissions Assessment and Monitoring Tool, a tool designed by a joint program of IWA and GIZ called BACLIM. And some of the lessons learned and recommendations that we highlight in the publication is that there is a need for increased understanding of the link between sanitation and climate. And to further align with Zambia's NDC reporting, there is a need to integrate climate change adaptation and mitigation measures into the sector. Oh, that's on the next slide, sorry. And there is a need for developing consistent greenhouse gas emissions monitoring and reporting mechanisms at all levels. There are limited best practices available globally. However, there is now a first baseline produced for the ECAM tool from Lusaka Water Supply and Sanitation Company. And the data and learnings of this baseline can now be used to further increase capacities in other utilities. On the next slide, I would now like to introduce to you a framework to capture the way forward of the highlighted findings and recommendations that we just heard. And in order to put them into a wider perspective, the two GIZ programs, together with the Zambian partners, have developed a framework which is called Inclusive Green City Sanitation. And it is a vision of what is needed to achieve inclusive green city sanitation in cities such as Lusaka. It is based on 3 internationally recognized frameworks, which are the IWA Water-Wise Cities Framework, the 100 Resilient Cities Levels of Water Resilience, and the GIZ Scaling Up Approach. And the framework set is made out of 4 pillars, which you can see in the picture. And just to quickly go through the pillars and highlight the framework, the first pillar, inclusive sanitation, is basically speaking about scaling up of safely managed sanitation, which includes on-site and off-site, along the entire sanitation chain. And this entails appropriate financing mechanisms, knowledge and skills within a utility that are needed for monitoring, operation and maintenance and service delivery, as well as close cooperation with the local private sector. The second circle, urban planning and design, highlights that smart city sanitation, planning and monitoring is only possible through embracing the power of digital tools and cross-sectoral cooperation. The third pillar, environment and climate, talks about that a city exists within its natural and changing environment. And there is a growing appreciation of the interlinkages between sanitation and climate change, requiring a direct response to adapting to its impacts, as well as longer-term mitigation action. And the fourth and last pillar, community, formal and informal structures, is highlighting the importance of stakeholder coordination, a shared vision, and an enabling framework, as they are at heart of sustainable sector governance and a key prerequisite for resilient, inclusive green city sanitation. And with this, I will hand over back to the moderator.
Thank you very much, Mintje and Amanda and Doreen, for that great presentation on the publication. I'm sure as participants we're all aware that that is only sort of highlighting some of the stuff that is in the publication, and naturally if you download it and look at the entire 60-page publication, there's a lot more detail in the publication. I'd like to segue now and hand over to Christian Rieck. And Christian Rieck is the program coordinator of the Reform the Water Sector Program Phase 2, and he will take us through an introduction of the program and some thoughts about looking forward. Over to you, Christian.
Thank you very much, Trevor, and thank you for the opportunity to say a few words around the program. So it's a follow-up program from the previous Reform of the Water Sector Program Phase 1, and also, as rightly mentioned, from the CFS program. So I'm quite happy that our ministry in Germany is funding this to really continue some of the brilliant work that has been done and to implement some of the recommendations that we've just been seen and presented to. So quickly, the program runs from September last year until end of 2022. And we have basically 4 pillars we are working on. One is on sector policy support, which is kind of the core of the reform program that has been ongoing over the last 2 decades, you can say. The second pillar is on district wash management in Luapula. So we're looking also more into rural wash and how to plan and implement wash interventions in the district. The third pillar is around urban wash and industrial wastewater management in Lusaka, which is a continuation of the CFS and really taking up some of the recommendations we are talking about today. And some, of course, some regulation we are also working on the national level with Navasco as a regulator. The fourth, rather not new, but more prominent component of the program is around jobs and skills development in Lusaka and also Luapula and on national level. So here we really expect some good impacts. And on the top right-hand side, you can see roughly the main outcomes of the program, looking at improving conditions for transparency in the planning and implementation of infrastructure investments in the sector, but also services, of course. And secondly, the competence for professionals in the sector to improve that one. Next slide, please. Here on the next slide, you can really see the concepts and key lessons that have been already talked about. It's more or less a summary, and we will try in the RWS2 program to pick on most of them. Just to quickly go through, it's around managing sanitation, not as business as usual, but really as a new thing, as a significant departure from what we usually do in the sector. Investment in data is really paying off and quite important around monitoring frameworks in the sector. Stakeholder coordination, taking time. I think we've been really working with our partners on establishing those already in the previous programs, and now really taking advantage and building on those previous achievements around coordination. The sanitation service chain is very critical. I think there's quite a lot of work still to do around business concepts, training frontline workers in terms of professionalization, formalization of FSM, then understanding markets and adapting funding and financing mechanisms. I think financing will be one of really cornerstones of what we will be doing around regulation, and really seeing how that improves some of the work that the infrastructure program LSP is doing in terms of sustainability, taking such infrastructure investments in household sanitation forward. Further benefits on the sanitation are shared, and of course we have to acknowledge that also the costs need to be shared, and we'll try to weave that into the financing aspects. And then lastly, investing in climate resilient infrastructure, protect service provision. I think this is again important around maybe leveraging financing out of the climate sector, and of course making sure that in future we have more resilience in the sector, also around COVID response. That's, I think, from my side. I'll hand back to the moderator and then go into the next slide. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Christian. We are now going to try and play a video as a bit of a pause from the presentations. I'd encourage all presenters to also look in the chat and answer as many questions as they can. And following the small video, which is future looking, we will transition into the panel discussion, which has 3 great panelists and is also future orientated. So let's give the video a try. Please go ahead, Finn.
Lusaka is the capital city of Zambia. Lusaka district is located with Lusaka is the capital city of Zambia. Lusaka district is located within Lusaka province, the smallest but most densely populated of the 11 Zambian provinces. According to the Central Statistical Office, the population of Lusaka district was estimated to be 3,002,530 in 2019. Around 70% of Lusaka's population lives in so-called peri-urban areas, PUAs. The PUAs are generally characterized by a lack of adequate housing, infrastructure, and water supply and sanitation services. Hello, I am Senior Health Inspector Mwewa Kalinda, but all that just makes me feel older than I am. So just call me One Inspector Kalinda. I am a Senior Public Health Inspector at the LCC Public Health Department. Look, don't mind the alphabet. Here's the real gist. This is the busiest time of the year for me, as during the rain season, cholera levels rise, especially in places with poor sanitation facilities. I love what I do, and I've become very interested in working to ensure that the people in high-density areas have access to proper, dignified, and safely managed sanitation facilities. The importance of carrying out routine sanitary inspections can't be stressed enough. Also, the need for households to have better toilets and hand washing facilities with soap. Inadequate sanitation creates public health risks through waterway contamination, person-to-person spread of disease, and other public exposure pathways, leading to negative outcomes, particularly diarrhea and stunted growth. Making steps towards improving your sanitation situation reduces infection in a community by interrupting the household to water pathway, and also has the potential to reduce the infection rates in a shared household.
Hi, my name is Susan Mulozi, and I'm with the Lusaka Water Supply and Sanitation Company Lusaka Sanitation Program, working under the newly formed Fecal Sludge Management Unit, FSM. I love what I do. I am very passionate about on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. I educate people on how connected the sanitation sector is to environmental issues such as groundwater protection. Lusaka is located in an area that is rich in underground water. This creates a great risk for groundwater pollution in large parts of the city. It's estimated that about 60% of Lusaka's water supply is derived from the fairly shallow groundwater that is abstracted within the city. As the LSP, we've been working to ensure that people living in the peri-urban areas are able to build better toilets. These toilets are lined and are also designed to be emptied. We also ensure that the fecal sludge that is collected in the pit latrine is emptied and taken away to be treated. It's a continuous process that we closely monitor.
Thank you so much. We go to the next slide. Thank you so much. So it's always great to have some visuals. Apologies that there was a slight delay in the video there, but nonetheless, that's on YouTube and you can look at the full version at your leisure. We now move over to a wonderful panel discussion where we have three of our leaders from Lusaka in the sanitation sector joining us for future-orientated, looking forwards panel discussion. We have from Lusaka Water Supply and Sanitation Company, the Managing Director, Mr. Engineer Jonathan Campata. And then we have from the Lusaka City Council, the Director of Public Health, Mr. Edgar Mwanafunzi. And then from the National Water Supply and Sanitation Council, we have Senior Inspector Chona Bidima. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We are very happy to have you here. I think let's dive right in with allowing each of you a quick 30 seconds to just introduce yourselves and say one or two words to your person. Over to you first, Jonathan.
Thank you, Trevor, and greetings to everyone. As has been introduced, I'm Jonathan Campata, Managing Director for Lusaka Water Supply and Sanitation Company. We are the largest utility in Zambia out of the 11. We serve over 3 million people in 6 different areas, including the capital city of Lusaka. As indicated, the peri-urban areas are our largest customers, where we have 70% of the population coming from there. So it's imperative that really issues of water supply and sanitation reach everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Edgar.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Edgar Mwanafunzi, and I'm the Director of Public Health in the greater city of Lusaka with a population of over 3 million people. My duty is to ensure that we protect the general public from the different diseases and of course promote public health. And we do this using different activities. I have a number of health inspectors, above 50, and sanitation is one of the key issues which really we have to deal with in order for us to reduce the diseases. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Edgar. Chola, would you like to have a word of introduction, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chona Bidima. I'm from NOASCO. I'm a senior inspector. And in the recent past, NOASCO has expanded its mandate to look into issues of regulating on-site sanitation. And by so doing, we also amended licenses for our service providers. We regulate 11 service providers. And so we have also amended their licenses to cover issues of on-site sanitation. So we are really in a phase where we want to make sure that issues to do with regulating on-site sanitation are brought on board and that we achieve what we've been able to achieve on the water side. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chola. We'll stay with you, Chola, with our first question, which is what is the status of the implementation of the on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management regulatory framework across all the 11 CUs from the regulator's perspective? If you can give us some insights on that.
All right. Thank you so much, Trevor, for that question. Just as a matter of a background, as a regulator, we developed regulatory framework for on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. That was really our starting point to bring on board regulation of on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. And so these were done, I think, about 2 years ago. So in the last 1.5 years, we've been trying to work on how we implement these regulatory frameworks. And what I must say is that we have been able to make some steps towards that. The first thing that we've been able to do is that we have been working actively with other institutions to develop standards for on-site sanitation, because what we realize is that without the standards, I think regulation will not be possible. So we've been working with the Lusaka City Council, we've been working with the Zambia Bureau of Standards and other relevant institutions to come up with standards. And I think we've made headway in that area. We'll soon be having standards for on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. The other issue that we've been able to do is we've developed draft sanitation guidelines where we've incorporated issues to do with on-site sanitation. So these are still in draft form. We are still getting comments from stakeholders before we can have them finalized. So these guidelines, once they're finalized, they'll be issued out to the 11 utilities to see what they can do in terms of trying to implement these guidelines. And the other thing is that we have developed and finalized permitting conditions. So what we have articulated in the regulatory frameworks is that the service providers, the CUs, should be able to work with other partners to deliver on-site sanitation services. So to guide them on how and who to engage in this area, we have developed what we are calling permitting conditions or permitting requirements. So the service providers will be able to engage third parties who can be private or community-based organizations, and they should make sure that these organizations actually conform to the permitting conditions. So in that way, they will be executing, a regulatory function by ensuring that whoever they put in charge is able to comply with regulatory requirements. And those have been finalized and approved by our board. So we will be rolling them out. But I must mention that Lusaka Water is already, in conformity with those, looking at what they've been able to do at the moment in terms of engaging, these third parties. So we are rolling them out to other CUs, and we are going to be using Lusaka Water and what they've been able to do as an example for others to be able to follow. The other thing that we've done, I think, which is critical, is that we've created what we are calling joint implementation teams in 3 utilities. These teams really are meant to establish the structures that will be used for service delivery as well as regulation. So what we've realized is that utilities have got different structures on the ground that deal with matters to do with on-site sanitation. And so we really need to identify who is doing what in these respective utilities, and then we streamline the roles and functions of these institutions that are performing one function or the other. So we've been able to establish these in 3 utilities, and as we speak, we have made progress to the extent that now we are at the stage where we are even going to be appointing inspectors to be able to collect information for us and look at the state of sanitation infrastructure, and also trying to give us information on access levels and how these structures are operating on the ground. Excellent. So basically those are the areas that we have tackled. And apart from that, obviously we are guiding in terms of capacity building in one way or the other to look at the different business models that utilities can engage in to try and provide this service. And we are doing this in collaboration with other institutions that are already engaged in these matters. And I must mention that GIZ working in Luapula province, I think we are fully engaged in these processes. We are also engaged with SNV in the areas where they are working. So basically those are the things that we're doing to try and institute regulation on site sanitation. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you so much, Chola. That was a great overview and a lot of indications of progress and work in progress, which is excellent. Moving over to Edgar now, could you give us a few insights into what measures are being put in place to implement the recently finalized on-site sanitation bylaw in Lusaka? As we all know, these processes take time. Once you've got the law or the bylaw done, you then have to put everything in place to implement it. So can you give us some insights into what you are doing, what your plans are, and how you're going to go about it? Thank you, Edgar. Over to you.
Thank you, Trevor. As already highlighted, 70% of people in Lusaka live in the peri-urban areas, and that is where we have this challenge of sanitation, and that is where quite a number of households have on-site sanitation. And for us to reach them, we've created site offices. So going forward, we have inspectors who will be stationed in these areas. So there are 7 constituencies in Lusaka, and in all the 7 constituencies, we've established offices there. We have moved so far to 2 places. We are yet to move to 5. We are hoping probably before the end of this coming month, we should be able to have moved to other places. And all this is to ensure that we position ourselves as we await the signing of the bylaw. Already our inspectors are on the ground to ensure that we inspect and we enforce the laws, because what is happening is we need to be where the people are, where these sanitation facilities are, because the idea is to ensure that we do the inspections when whatever is found to be full or not in conformity with the law, we ensure that those people work on their structures. If it's emptying, we are working together with Lusaka Water and Lusaka Water and Sanitation Company now to ensure that the full latrines are emptied. I know that probably Mr. Engineer Campata will talk about the companies which have been established, who we are working with, who we are calling through the peri-urban fecal sludge management unit. We call them whenever the households are found to have full toilets. Instead of us connecting to the companies, we are calling the peri-urban sector or the unit, which is in charge of on-site sanitation, and they are able to connect these site offices to the right companies which are able to empty. Apart from that, we are also looking at the aspect of digitalizing our work so that it is easy for us to operate and also operate more effectively and efficiently without really doing the same thing over and over again. And these digital platforms, in conjunction with, again, Lusaka Water and Sanitation Company, once we post whatever is happening in the sanitation sector, depending on on-site sanitation, then the key stakeholders will be able to see the information and will be able to act effectively without wasting a lot of time. And apart from, of course, the digital sharing, there's also the issue of coordination, as I spoke about the issue of coordination, apart from coordinating with Lusaka Water and Sanitation Company. Amanda spoke about the Lusaka District Wash Coordinating Committee, the Public Health Committee. That is a committee now which is coordinating different aspects of water and sanitation. And we're hoping that they will be able to help in terms of awareness creation. Because enforcement, as you might be aware, Trevor, enforcement is like a pyramid, and you need to ensure that you create awareness so that people can know exactly what they're expected of. Already we are doing that awareness so that even when that law is signed and it fully comes into effect, no one will say that they don't know about what they're expected of to do, but they'll be all aware about the provisions of the law. So that is what we are doing. We are ensuring that we use all avenues to ensure that the people are aware of the issues which are in the bylaw. That is the type of latrine they're expected to construct, what are the measures they are supposed to take when their latrine is full, who they should report to. So all those things are being discussed now. So that is something which we are doing, and we are excited because we are working quite well with the key stakeholders who are Lusaka Water and Sewerage Company. Of course, NWASCO itself, was I think with the works we've done with GIZ in the past, we've been used to give key contributions towards the development of the standards at national level, which is quite a plus on our side. So basically, that is what I can say for now. And all the best.
Thank you so much, Edgar, for those insights and information on how things are moving forwards with respect to the implementation of the bylaw. That's a lovely setting now to move over to Jonathan and ask, I mean, we are all aware of the Lusaka Sanitation Program as a big infrastructure program in Lusaka. However, all infrastructure programs come to an end. And from the company's perspective, from your perspective in the company, what is your overarching strategy for continuing to extend sanitation services in the low-income communities of Lusaka? Over to you, Jonathan. We can't hear you at the moment. You need to put your mic on.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. Just to give you a bit of a background, the Lusaka Sanitation program actually is the single biggest investment in terms of tackling the sanitation issues we have in Lusaka. We have a master plan that runs from 2011 to 2035, and we did identify that sanitation is the major issue if we're going to contribute to achieving the sustainable development goals of universal access. But also bearing in mind that if we follow the conventional way of doing things in terms of just having sewers, really, it's not possible to sewer the whole of Lusaka. As we're told that we have 70% in the peri-urban areas, and these areas historically then planned, so even the spatial layout is very difficult to put in conventional sewers, apart from the cost. The huge cost. So as an immediate solution and the medium solution, obviously the technology of adopting the fecal sludge management is something that became attractive. So through the Lusaka Sanitation Program, we've got this component of putting up the fecal sludge management facilities in place. And our strategy really is that we have embraced the citywide inclusive sanitation as the overarching approach which we're going to follow, and I think we are grateful for the support we received from all our cooperating partners who have actually built the capacity in us to introduce the fecal sludge management. So capacity is being built as one of the the strategies to ensure continuation beyond the Lusaka Sanitation program. We have in place a FICO sludge management unit, which has got 6 members of staff. At the moment, we're being also supported by consultants who is actually teaching our staff to do the verification in terms of the emptying, in terms of the business model we have developed. So we are confident that even beyond the LSP will be able to actually continue the work. The business model has been developed, and we have 6 private sector companies who are actually being used to actually do the emptying and the transportation. As a utility, we still maintain the treatment of the waste. And again, under the Lusaka Sanitation program, we're going to put up 2 FSM facilities. Of course, issues of sustainability in terms of financial sustainability are key. And at the moment, we're asking the households to contribute, but it's not the full cost. We are subsidizing that cost, but over time, we'll be able to come up to a point where the customers contribute more, but also we are aware of the fact that these are also low-income areas. There might be people who might not be able to cover the cost. And we are in discussions with the NOASCO to see how we can reintroduce the sanitation surcharge. The sanitation surcharge comes from a percentage of the storage charge. Bear in mind that we're taking the city-wide inclusive approach. It means that even those customers of ours who are on the conventional sewers, they should make a contribution to ensuring that the sanitation for the whole city is taken into account. Because if there's poor sanitation in the peri-urban areas, even those who are in the sewered areas, which may be considered to be middle class, they will be affected if there's a disease outbreak. So this actually reinforces the approach which we are taking in terms of the city-wide inclusive. In terms of capacity building, I saw some questions that came up. We're taking it at three levels. In-house capacity building, there's a program under GIZ support which we're going to start in terms of capacity building through the vocational training institutions. Also to a limited level, some international capacity building. Just to mention that our head of the FSM actually did graduate from the master's program at IHE. There's a master's in sanitation. So through that, I think with these different capacity building initiatives, we have the right team to manage the business. Also, just to thank Lusaka City Council, NOASCO. I think without a strong collaboration, I think it would be difficult for Lusaka Water Supply and Sanitation Company to actually do this on its own, as well as all the other cooperative partners who are supporting the LSP. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jonathan. We will thank you very much to our panelists, Jonathan, Edgar, and Chola, for really providing us insight and really informative outlook on what's going to be coming and going to be undertaken in Lusaka. And you shared a very positive message with all of us, that there's a lot that has been done, a lot that is being done, and a lot of challenges that you are ready to take on going forward. For all the participants, any questions you have to the panelists, please by all means put them into the chat and we will do our best to answer them. However, due to time constraints, we are having to move the program forward. And so we'll segue over now to a word of thanks and closing remarks from Mr. Peter Kamara, who is the Water and Energy Cluster Coordinator in GIZ Zambia. So over to you, Peter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trevor. Good afternoon, colleagues. As Trevor said, my name is Peter Kamara. I coordinate the water and energy portfolio here in Zambia. Christian already introduced the Reform of the Water Sector program, which is one of our programs. We also work in water resources management and stewardship issues, as well as in some energy projects as well, together with our KfW and BGR colleagues in the water sector as well. If we were all in Stockholm today together in one room, then I would probably be the one between the lunch break. Yourselves at the lunch break now. But I'll still keep the tradition of sort of short closing remarks, definitely, so that everybody can enjoy the lunch break in a second. I just wanted to say a few words, though, about the biggest lesson learned to me, in a way, that we have heard a lot in this session, which is, to me, co-creation and collaboration. And I can really see, both in the sector and then obviously on sanitation in Lusaka, as well as for this publication that we have launched today, co-creation has really been a critical factor. And against that, a big word of thanks to you, Chona, to you, Jonathan, and to you, Edgar, not only for participating today, but also for helping make this project a success and for moving the sanitation agenda forward a lot. And I think that speaks to the relationship that we have developed over the last couple of years under the CFS project, but also under various other GIZ projects. And I really hope that we can build on this in the future as well. As we all know, like I say, on-site sanitation, fecal sludge management, it's an effort of multiple stakeholders and will only be successful if we work together. Similarly, I would also just like to echo a word of thanks to the GIZ Globe department, in particular the sanitation sector program, Sustainable Sanitation, which has really done fantastic work, not only working with us in Lusaka on the publication itself, but also over the time supporting the implementation of the CFS project in Lusaka. So many of the colleagues from the sector program have supported us a lot here. So thanks very much for that. Trevor, I would also like to mention you and recognize you. Thank you for moderating the session today, which was a really nice end or roundup also. And I think for your time and your engagement in Zambia, your commitment, you have contributed to the success of the project, but also to driving a few processes with regards to sanitation, fecal sludge management forward, which is fantastic. For us, I think this publication is really important. And for the very fact that the colleagues who are sharing the lessons learned were mentioning that we will continue to work on this. And I think we will continue to work on this with this session, I think even more energized than previously. And trying to make this not anymore business as usual, this departure from business as usual, as it was called earlier, trying to make this as successful as possible. And managing sanitation in cities such as Lusaka in a different way in the future. Obviously, there was an excellent start, and we have heard all about it by Chona, by Edgar, by Jonathan, with regards to obviously the bylaw in Lusaka, the regulation that came before that was developed, the joint implementation teams working or ensuring the collaboration between the institutions and the utilities. And yeah, that is obviously a great starting point, and not continuing with business as usual, but really looking at it as a departure from business as usual. But of course, and this was one of the questions also asked in the chat, I think the challenge ahead of us is huge. In Zambia, I think the current figures of access to sanitation, access to basic sanitation is at a little bit more at 55%. And so a large part of the population still do not have access to basic sanitation, let alone sort of higher levels of sanitation access. So in that sense, in closing, I would really encourage all of us in the spirit of co-creation and in the spirit of collaboration, let us move forward and do the best to improve sanitation for the betterment of livelihoods in Zambia and indeed in many parts of the world. Thank you very much.